second grade. It's Mrs. Hops from Churchville Elementary, and I am here to show you how to paint your chameleons today. You're going to need your drawing from last week that you should have already traced. You're going to need a set of watercolors, as well as a paintbrush and some water. Before we actually get started painting, I do want to go over just a couple of tips to make it a little bit easier. When you're using your paintbrush, you want to make sure that you try really hard to take care of it. And I like to tell my students that this is like your friend. It is your pet. We'll call him Mr. Whiskers, like our little pet brush. And just like any other pet, if you're too rough with a pet, and when you're petting it, actually with your fingers or with your hands, it's going to rough up your pet's hair. And your pet's not going to want to play with you anymore or be around you. Mr. Whiskers is very sensitive. He doesn't like to have a bad hair day. So be very gentle with him. When you go to get the color, it's the same way. So I'm going to do a quick little demonstration of the right way to get your color. They are called watercolors. So you need water to get the color. You're going to take Mr. Whiskers and you're just going to gently dip him down into the water. You don't need to push him all the way down. Just need a little bit on your color, and you have to decide what color you're going to start with. And get that color just a little bit wet with a little bit of water on it. And you can put just a little drop. Now, watercolors are kind of funny because as I sit and take my brush and pet the color with my brush, I'm just gonna gently, like I'm petting a cat, stroke my brush across the surface. The more I sit and pet this paint, the darker my color will be, and it gets all in the tip of my brush, which you can see is now orange. The trick to painting nicely is to get enough color on your brush, but also take your brush almost like it's a ballerina and hold it on the tippy toe, like a ballerina would be standing on her tippy toes, and you're gonna very gently just kind of outline the area that you want to paint. Now we're painting our chameleons warm or cool colors. So since I got orange and I started outlining my chameleon's head in orange, I've got to stick with all warm colors today. So I'll be using reds, oranges, and yellows. Now since I have the outline done on the tiptoe, that helps me stay in the lines a little bit. Plus those crayon lines I traced help me stay in the lines even more because they resist the water. Then when I'm done outlining everything, I like to come back in and lay my brush down a little flatter and drag the color across. This is why we call this a flat wash. And your goal is to paint everything so there's no white spaces showing. If it's supposed to be a fully orange head of a chameleon, it should be totally orange. Now I might want to make my body a different color. If I do, I have orange on my brush. I don't want to go in and get red next because that's gonna mix. So I have to do what I like to call my students do, the hula. You're gonna put Mr. Whiskers in the water and do a little hula dance. Hula, 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 hula. That will make him, give him a bath and make him nice and clean again. So I can dip the tip of my brush in, wipe it across the side so that there's no drips. Now that I have that water clean, I can dip it, wipe it, and get another new color. I'm gonna pet it very gently. You don't wanna dig down into your paint because you will ruin it and it'll form almost like a thick, waxy coating. So I think I want my body of my chameleon to change colors. I'm gonna make it red. And I'm gonna tiptoe around those colors, around those edges, and come back in. Now his legs, there's no stopping point there, but I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna paint all the way down it. And you can see I'm tiptoeing around the edges, going nice and slow, making sure I'm filling in all those white spaces. But if I only have 3 colors, it's gonna get pretty boring. But you can do some really cool things, just like we did with coloring with crayons before. We can do some really cool color mixing things with paint. The trick is though, since I started with warm colors, all the colors that I need have to be warm as well. Anytime you run out of color, especially if you're painting a big, large area like your body, Just dip the tip of your brush into the water and then go back and pet that color. And you can see I can come back in and fill in those spaces. Now I might have a lot of white spaces, so I'm going to take my brush and go back and catch those spaces that I missed. The cool thing about watercolor painting is you can mix those colors. So let's say my legs start off being red, but I wanted to change them into another warm color. Since I'm using warm, I have to stick with those warms. I could clean my brush off and go back into this orange and make a little bit of orange down at the bottom of my legs. Tiptoeing again. But this time I'm going to blend these two colors together. So I'm going to bring the orange up into the red a little bit, and it makes like a reddish orange. Since I mix a red and orange, and red is warm and orange is warm, red-orange is a warm color. So I did something that's good. And the fun thing too is since I have this reddish orange color on my brush, the paint on my brush is already that color. So I can use it to paint the other side of my legs. It's a pretty neat trick. Remember, we're only painting our chameleon today, so be careful not to paint your sky or your leaves or your branches today. We're just focusing on our chameleon. Now I have other things. Maybe these stripes in here might want to be a different color. So I'm going to clean, my yellow's a little dirty. It's got a little green in it. So to clean that out, I'm just going to take a little water on my brush. And this time I'm going to pet it a little bit harder, like I'm washing my hair of my pet, like I gave it a bath. And look, my yellow's nice and clean again. And then I just do the floor with my brush to clean off any of that color. Then when I come back and pet the brush nice and neatly and safely, I'll get a nice flat piece of color. Maybe I want to make this little spikes on the end of my back yellow. But notice I'm using the tiptoe of my brush, Mr. Ballerina here. That way it helps me stay in the lines. Trying to go nice and slow. Now we talked about neutral colors today as well. Things like white, things like black and brown. You do, if you have a watercolor palette that has 8 colors, have a brown and have a black that you might want to use. But I like to leave those spaces white until I'm all done, because notice with watercolors, there's a lot of water on the paper. And if I put a big section here that's kind of watery, and then I try to fill in this little section with black, that black sometimes can mix in there. So a lot of times I like to tell my kids to wait till the end until it's a little drier, or you have to soak up that puddle. To soak up that puddle so it doesn't run across your paper or mix with other colors that you don't want, you take Mr. Whiskers and you're going to very carefully with your finger just squeeze out any water he might have on his hair so he's a little bit drier, and it makes your brush a little flatter. And then you can lay that flat brush right down in that puddle and it'll suck up some of those colors. Sometimes if it's a big puddle, you have to do that more than once. Notice each time I squeeze out the water, I'm doing it over top the water bucket so I don't make it splash on top of my chameleon. And I can make him thirsty and he can soak up all these puddles. Once he's soaked up those puddles, it's a little bit easier to paint in another section if I want to make the colors slightly different. You can also sometimes fix your painting mistakes. Say I like this yellow, it looks pretty cool, I like it, it's nice and bright and intense. But I'm talking to my friend Susie or looking over at my mom, and I accidentally put a different color onto my painting. The green that's in our paint palettes is kind of a cool color. It has too much blue in it. So one thing you can do to fix it is to add a warm color to it. So yellow and green are next to each other on the color wheel, and if I put a little bit of yellow with this, it'll make it into a warm green. And then since I mixed it on here, I can pick up this color, move it to a different place, and then use it to paint. So maybe I can make a really cool pattern where I have like a yellowy green color, then a yellow, then a yellowy green color. If there's a lot of that color, you can also move it and paint with it in other sections. Because remember, once you start painting with warm colors inside the body of your chameleon, all those sections have to be painted with other warm colors. Now I know if I put a color that's really cool, I wasn't paying attention again. Oh my gosh, Miss Hops is so bad at paying attention. And I accidentally put a little bit of blue on my paper. Blue is a cool color, that's gonna ruin everything. Well, I can make blue kind of warm by turning it into a warm green by adding a lot of yellow to it. So look at how that kind of goes away a little bit and becomes more of yellow. Now, not every mistake can be fixed, so you do want to try to take your time and go really slow the first time so that you don't have to fix mistakes. Now, I have a lot of yellow in here. I think I'm going to change. I'm going to do the hula, and I'm going to add a little bit of orange to this yellow eyeball to make a yellowy orange. And since it was already wet and I just dropped my brush down on there, it kind of does this really cool wet on wet technique where the colors kind of swirl together a little bit, and I like it, so I'm going to leave that white. It's all about taking your time. Filling in your white spaces and going really, really slowly so that you're filling in your spaces, and little areas like this that are still white, you want to go back and fix. So do the hula, go back to that first color and fill that in as best you can. You do not want to paint your sky because the wet of your body, when I put another color next to it and start painting this, like let's say blue, those two colors can run together, and if I get too close to the edge, oh no, I just got red into my blue. So the best thing to do for that is just like we were trying to soak up puddles before, squeeze that water out of your brush. Then lay that down and try to pick up that color before it goes into the other area. Sometimes again, you have to do that more than once, but don't scrub it because you could actually tear a hole in your paper. My chameleon looks pretty good. We'll have to wait and see how I finish this next time.